Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking about what it takes to supply deskless workers with the right mobile apps to work with core Microsoft Business Solutions. Power Platform has had an important influence on the perception of how companies investing in Microsoft Business Solutions should extend or customize their systems, including for mobile scenarios. But messaging from Microsoft around Power Platform has evolved over the years, from the notion of enabling citizen developers and no-code customization to now promoting it as a full-scale development platform for everyone from business users to pro devs. To help us get another perspective on the state of mobile app development, our guest is Ben Mitchell of Resco. He leads partnerships and success in North America for the company. Resco is the sponsor of this episode, and Ben and I discuss how Resco sees their mobile solution development expertise aligning with the strengths and limitations of today's core Microsoft technologies. As Ben explains, Microsoft customers still need to deploy advanced mobile capabilities, including under demanding conditions. He tells me about what some of those requirements are today and why Resco believes they and their partners are well positioned to meet those needs while staying aligned with Microsoft's core roadmap and vision. Okay, Ben Mitchell, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Why don't we get started by just having you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, your role, and your work with clients on mobile solutions using Resco and Microsoft technology.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. In terms of my role at Resco and kind of a little bit about how that happened, I joined back in February of this year, so relatively new to the Resco family, but not necessarily so new to the Microsoft ecosystem and mobility. I worked, 10, 15 years ago for a company called 10 Digit Software, who at the time was a Resco competitor. They focused exclusively on BlackBerry at the time, and we all know kind of the way that story wound up. BlackBerry kind of went the way of the dodo, and there was the rise of iOS and the iPhone, and Resco kind of emerged as the main player there. To cut a long story short, I kept in touch with Ivan Stanyo, who's really kind of the main evangelist here in North America. And more recently, it just happened that I was coming to the end of one opportunity, and Ivan was looking for somebody to help head up some of the partnering and success side of Resco's North America business. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And I've been, speaking mainly with partners, but also some customers over the last 6 or 7 months, just to better understand where they perceive Resco fitting into the whole Microsoft and mobility ecosystem, and how we can do better on that, how we can make sure they know what we're doing, how we do it, and where some of the opportunities lie.
It is a complex time for those opportunities, finding them, understanding mobile options. Can you talk a little bit more about how you do tend to explain sort of where we are in that, story from maybe a historical perspective, and as you look to the future and listen to what partners are talking about for the future of the kinds of applications they want to develop?
Yeah, definitely. And interesting from a historical perspective, when I talk to partners, both old and new, some who've known Resco for a long time and others who kind of don't really know who we are and what we've done. It's interesting that they tend to have, or they tend to see us through that lens, mostly of Microsoft Dynamics Field Service. That was a big part of what Resco has achieved over the last 15 plus years, that relationship, the sort of tighter relationship, more formal relationship that we had with Microsoft to supply mobile capabilities for Dynamics Field Service, kind of 2018 through 2021, 2022. So that's the kind of lens through which many of them perceive Resco. And when that relationship or formal relationship wound down, I think many of them kind of thought, what's Resco going to do now? Microsoft has their own capability for field service mobile. Is Resco just going to kind of creep off into the shadows and die? But, I think that says a lot about maybe the misunderstanding or just lack of knowledge about what Resco does more broadly, and also where we're focusing for the future. So it kind of brings me round to, yes, absolutely, our focus in the past has or was very, very focused around dynamic CRM. So whether that be field service, sales, CE, we provided that robust, best of breed, if you like, mobile experience for customers who really needed things like strong offline capability. If they were synchronizing large volumes of data, if they had specific business logic that they wanted to incorporate into the mobile forms as part of the mobile experience for their frontline workers. So part of my job with the partners that I speak to is, yes, explaining that we do those things, but looking forward, we're increasingly seeing a new opportunity with the Power Platform and with Dataverse as this kind of back-end component to, certainly from a Resco perspective, but using Dataverse as this hub, this link from Resco on the front end to just about anything, whether that be other Microsoft technologies like Business Central or F&O, or even to completely different technologies where there is a mobile requirement that needs access to aspects of data from other systems. The Dataverse is really that hub that can be used as almost like a staging area. And because Resco natively integrates with the Dataverse the same way that it does with all of the kind of CRM-based properties like field service, that's really what I've been focused on more recently with partners. And there's really seems to be some appetite and some resonance with those partners that this is something that can be more applicable to them than the handful of opportunities they might have seen to work with Resco when it was more exclusively focused on the purely CRM-based properties.
So talk to me a little bit more about sort of the partner perspective when it comes to productized apps, whether that's something that you're buying like licensed from a vendor versus the interest in or demand for customized apps that partners are perhaps building to suit the specific needs of some customers. And I know from you and from Resco, I mean, that's one of the most interesting things to often hear about is, I mean, there's so many varied needs, as I'm sure you know well, from different kinds of organizations and different industries. Is that changing though? Is there more weight or less weight perhaps being put on sort of that pre-built app versus, maybe templatized or totally custom?
Yeah, great question. And we kind of hear a little bit of both from partners. Certainly, there are a number of partners who are understandably doubling down, jumping in both feet into that Power Platform world where customers are telling them that before they necessarily move to something like a very heavily configured solution like a dynamic CRM for sales, for example, they say, well, our needs are perhaps a little more focused, a little more narrow to begin with. And, the question is, how can you help us with that? Can you help us with that? And it seems like the answer to that in many cases is yes, we can. And the way we're going to do that is through the Power Platform because it's so flexible. It's so capable at helping partners to hear a customer's requirements and then building to that list of requirements. Now, on the kind of more commoditized or productized angle that you mentioned, some partners are definitely seeing a world where they come across a particular industry that they're focused in, or maybe it's a niche within that industry where they're saying, we seem to be getting a lot of requests and interest to create solutions or build applications that are similar. So is there a mechanism where we could use or leverage the Power Platform to make something a little more repeatable, turn that into a product that we can sell to that vertical market? And where Resco really fits into that is we can offer that mobile extension of that capability to a partner in a very, very streamlined and accessible way. Yes, there are those that would say, I could just go and build it in the Power Platform, a model-driven app that is going to go out to a mobile device. But the analogy I often use is, yeah, you could, but it's a bit like using I think what they call in North America, a weed whacker. It's like using a weed whacker to cut the grass on your acreage. You can do it, but it's not going to be much fun. It's going to take a long time, and the outcome is never going to be as good as if you'd used the right tool for the job. In the case of the analogy, probably a lawnmower. And, that Resco example is similar. It's not that the Power Platform can't do it. It's that in its evolution, in its growth, in its maturity, I don't see that it's quite to the level from a mobile perspective as Resco is. We've spent the last 15 years developing a platform that allows partners to bring dynamic CRM capabilities to frontline workers on mobile devices. And now we're expanding that out to the Power Platform and Dataverse. We can really offer that. And I think some of the value that it gives to partners or brings to partners is that compressed timeline. We can be much more, agile and efficient in terms of helping them deliver that quickly. And also on that productization side, we can help them pour their own intellectual property that they develop in working in these vertical industries into that mobile experience so that they can bolt that mobile experience onto the core Power Platform solution that they're building. So that's really the vision, if you like, that I've been painting with partners. And with many, it is starting to resonate that they see, yes, that isn't necessarily something that they focus on. They definitely focus more on the back office, on people sitting behind desks or working on a laptop, for example. They're less focused on the skills and experiences for the frontline worker. And that's really where that partnership with Resco can help.
Yeah, this conversation that you're talking about, it really does bring up maybe a bit of a broader debate about how comprehensively, you might say, Power Platform has sort of sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the air in terms of what partners think about when it comes to customization or, as you said, if you're very focused on back office, perhaps they haven't thought about it as much as they should, and where its real strengths and weaknesses are, and where partners should be perhaps imparting some discipline of their own in really understanding where the strengths of the various tools that they're calling upon come into play. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that in terms of how you've seen Power Platform shaping partner perspective. And I don't know, I think of it in terms of, I think, discipline for some reason, in terms of not overusing a tool like Power Platform or where it's really good and where it can maybe, if it's not used in the right way, not quite live up to expectations in certain cases. And it's not really a criticism specifically of Power Platform, but just, I think, a more general tendency that new technologies have to not always be applied in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. And I think it's easy when you've got something as both powerful and flexible as the Power Platform. It's easy to kind of think of it as, I can use this for everything, whether you should or not. And, I've said before, when you've got a hammer, lots of things look like a nail. And I think that's, in terms of your kind of discipline angle, I do see this as something that isn't necessarily hard to shift, but it is a shift, because this is what many of those partners know. They're Microsoft partners through and through. So they see this incredibly flexible tool from Microsoft that can help them and their customers meet needs. It's when it gets to the more challenging areas. Perhaps a good example is something like, from a kind of through the Resco lens, is one of the modules we're very focused on is our inspections module, or questionnaires as it's sometimes called as well. That's something that, yes, there are some capabilities where you can build data collection, data gathering type solutions in a model-driven app, but it's more limited, and it's also much more difficult to achieve. So you might end up spending a fair amount of time and money building something in the Power Platform that could have been not only achieved much more quickly and easily with a platform like Resco, but the end product is never going to be quite as good. I shouldn't say never. Right now, at least, it's not going to be as robust and capable as the Resco component. And it kind of leads me into another component of what Resco is bringing to the table. One angle that absolutely we talk about is, Resco's ability to deliver these experiences and capabilities using a native app out to a mobile device. But with the Power Platform, doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And this is where I'll use that inspections example a little more. That is something where we have deep capability. And it's also something that when we've spoken to partners, they do find challenging to build on the Power Platform. So not only can we make that capability available on an Android device, on an iOS device, out in the field, 100% offline, all of those things that you might expect Resco would offer. But we have this kind of secondary, and by secondary, I don't mean it's in second place. I mean additional capability where we can actually embed that inspections capability directly into a model-driven app. So kind of much more natively, tightly integrated with the Power Platform. So if you're building an app on the Power Platform and you say, I really need a data gathering component, but I don't want to necessarily push it out to a native application, you can embed a Resco inspection built using our kind of template builder, which again is a no-code mechanism for building these types of inspections. You can then build that and embed it directly into a model-driven app. So the choices for a partner and a customer are just being expanded. It's not a case of should either or, should I use Resco or the Power Platform? It's really a case of why not use both to deliver more choice and in many cases, a kind of better experience for the customer.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the more specific vertical solution development needs that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, again, from a Resco perspective, we've had traction over the years in many different verticals. One that is particularly top of mind for me right now, just because of the volume of conversations, opportunities that I've been interacting with, is the energy industry, whether that is renewables or oil and gas. They tend to be, that vertical tends to involve a lot of field-based, deskless frontline workers. So whether that is an individual who is installing a wind turbine as part of a wind farm that's out in rural Wyoming, or whether that is, somebody who is performing health and safety inspections on an oil rig miles out at sea. These are like the poster children of the Resco value proposition. These people are in inhospitable environments. They tend to have little or no effective wireless coverage, and they need applications that just work. So previously, we could absolutely address those needs when there was an existing or proposed Dynamics Field Service, Dynamic Sales, Dynamic CE type deployment. But with the advent or the growth of Power Platform and Dataverse, we're now seeing this slew of opportunities that are really run the whole gamut between complex and simple. I've seen things as simple as timesheets. Somebody needs to log their time effectively in a challenging environment. We can help with that, right through to a more complex, multi-page, hundreds of items inspection list for somebody on an oil rig who needs to take photographs, scan barcodes, have it, all singing, all dancing, and be fully available 100% offline. So what used to be a more narrow kind of window of opportunity for Resco has really expanded to anything that somebody in the field needs to be able to do quickly, effectively, efficiently.
Yeah, it's such an interesting history and story of the way this, I guess you'd almost say the window has sort of shifted on how people view, not that these challenges are new. In some cases they are, but in many cases they're typical challenges that are unique to industries, but the window of sort of where you, as a solution provider, choose to solve them is maybe a little different and requires this sort of recalibration, which is, I think, what makes this conversation so interesting. And maybe as a follow-up, to what you were just describing, what are you seeing from partners? Perhaps what are you recommending to partners when it comes to building this kind of IP today, or perhaps building blueprint structures within which to provide solutions of these types?
Yeah, I think certainly when I'm having conversations with partners, there's a big aspect of, almost like they would do, I would imagine, with their Power Platform projects, is some level of prototyping, starting small, getting to know the Resco platform a little bit, and maybe taking an existing Power Platform application solution that they've already developed for a customer and saying, how would we take that mobile? Maybe they haven't today, or they have and it's not working quite how they or the customer would want it to. I think that's perhaps the easiest path forward, is to say, what would it take using the Resco platform to deliver a robust mobile capability for this customer? And I think what many of them find, and the way I position it, is that it's not to say that all mobile applications or mobile experiences are the same for a frontline worker, but there is a pretty big percentage that is common amongst all of them. So I would say around 80% of the base mobile capability is going to be similar. They're going to probably want access to an account type entity or element. They're gonna have some contacts. They're probably going to have activities and maybe assets that they're managing. Once they've done that for a customer or a project, what we're seeing or what we're proposing is that they can take the nucleus, the core of that solution that they built in Resco, and they can use that on any number of other projects going forward. They don't have to reinvent the wheel from a Resco perspective. They can take the core of that solution, and if there is one additional aspect that they need, it's very easy to create a second, third, 30th template that they would use particularly for that project. So what they're really doing is they're building up a library of similar solutions that they can apply on their Power Platform or similar projects going forward, but without anywhere near the amount of effort it might take doing it another way. So it's really, I'd like to think that we're streamlining things and making it much simpler, more cost effective, more efficient for both the partner and the customer to take their solutions mobile.
Before we wrap up here, in terms of other capabilities that you're particularly excited about, or other sort of mobile app scenarios, is there anything else you wanted to mention where it relates to Power Apps in particular, or perhaps other parts of the Power Platform?
I think really we feel like in some respects we're just at the beginning of this. So we're focused on three broader areas to begin with in terms of turbocharging partners' ability to deliver on their Power Platform, Power App solutions, and taking them mobile. So those three areas are really the first. We've kind of already discussed somewhat: the inspections, questionnaires, data collection type element. The second is more around kind of tips and how to. Is kind of the way I sometimes frame it. It's more, imagine you're out in the field and you're doing a task or a function that's a little more complicated. Rather than dragging around a 500-page manual that is going to help you fix a broken cable in a lift shaft or something like that, the second piece there is related to Resco Guides, we've called it in the past. It's really that ability to have available at your fingertips the right kind of information to help you do any given task more effectively. And what's exciting about that is some of the aspects of artificial intelligence that we're seeing from a Resco perspective creeping into that. So, if you're a person in the field and you say you want to know how to the top way to fix a particular problem, there may be more than one way to do that, but one of the ways we're seeing AI being able to help is it can learn from all of the previous jobs that have been done that are similar, and it can maybe give you the top 3 ways that you might fix that in a given situation. So the model is really learning how best to support that person in the field. So two aspects there. There's the AI component, but there's also the basic, okay, I've heard what the AI has to say. Now I'm going to bring up a virtual step-by-step on how it's going to do that. And Resco is offering that, whether that's in an offline mobile app on a tablet or whether that's in a model-driven app. You've got the flexibility of both. The third one we're working on right now is more of a reporting focus. So, if you've been out in the field and you've done a job, how are you going to then report that back, whether that's to the end customer or internally to the organization? And that's another aspect that we've heard is quite challenging within the Power Platform. So we've basically looked at those 3 areas as something that Resco does particularly well right now. And it's not to say that the Power Platform, you can't do those things within the Power Platform. It's that we feel that we are slightly better positioned to offer those as a kind of turbocharged experience within the Power Platform.
All right. Well, I certainly look forward to seeing what's coming up next in the short term and then in the midterm here from Resco as these sorts of stories evolve. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure chatting, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
This has been another episode of the MSTW podcast. My thanks once again to Ben for joining. And this message from Resco. To discover more about Resco for Power Platform, visit www.resco.net/learning/power-platform. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. And if you want to see Resco in action, you can email benjamin.mitchell@resco.net. Also visit the Resco booth, number 125 at Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Las Vegas, happening October 3rd through the 5th. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.